Today's episode will talk about a very delicate topic: the level of physical, psychological, and financial abuse of individuals within the LGBTQIAP+ community and individuals over 70 years of age has increased year upon year. Today's case exposes the vulnerabilities of both groups. I'm going to tell you the story of neighbours Peter Farquhar and Anne Moore Martin, who, despite never having met each other, fell in love with the same guy. But this guy just wanted to take financial advantage of them and take as much of their money as he could. Peter Farquhar was an English writer born on January 3rd, 1946. He had a degree in literature from the University of Cambridge, and after a 35-year career as an English and literature teacher, he retired to write novels. His teaching career was marked by awards and titles. He won the Best Teacher Award several times and was always described by his students as the one who made the greatest impact on their academic journeys. Even after Peter retired, he still taught, but he limited himself to teaching literature to students on the doctoral program at the University of Buckingham, a very select group. It was in this group, in 2013, at the age of 67, that he met Benjamin Field, 23, who was then known as Ben. Ben, born on October 27, 1990, had just graduated with a degree in literature and was about to start a master's degree. He came from an extremely religious family and had worked as an apostolic administrator in a Lutheran church for 6 years. He soon developed a strong admiration for Peter. It was very common for Peter to become friends with his students. Some even became friends for life, but with Ben the friendship went a little further. Although Peter was liked by many people, he was a very lonely man. This was probably due to the fact that for many years he was not comfortable with his sexuality. Peter considered himself to be homosexual, which he believed was wrong and went against his moral principles and the teachings of his church. So Peter had chosen to spend his life in celibacy. But after he began his friendship with Ben, Peter became increasingly comfortable with his own nature. At first they were just friends. They went on many walks together and occasionally went to dinner at each other's house. Peter wasn't much of a drinker, but after meeting Ben, he attended more social events and started to drink socially. As their friendship grew, Ben increasingly stayed the night at Peter's house. He gradually won his heart, and the day before Peter celebrated his 68th birthday, Ben formally asked him to marry him. Peter happily accepted, and in March of the same year, 2014, the couple formalized their union in a small, intimate ceremony with only Peter's family and a few friends present. Peter was the happiest he had ever been in his life. Everyone could see the sparkle in his eyes. After the wedding, the two slept in the same bed and began what they described as a partially sexual relationship. Peter always had the habit of writing in a diary, and on one of the pages, with the date close to the wedding, he wrote, "Our union marks one of the best moments of my life. Happy, I will not die alone." In November of that same year, Peter revised his will to include Ben as a beneficiary. Ben would be entitled to £15,000 and also the right to fully acquire the property where they lived. However, in the will, there was a term linked to the acquisition of the property. They would have to live together for at least 2 years before Peter's death for him to be eligible. If this deadline was not met, the house would go to Peter's nieces, who were the other named beneficiaries in the will. The two appeared to have an excellent relationship in the eyes of their friends, but terrifying things were happening behind closed doors. Soon after the wedding, Ben began reading Peter's diaries and looking through his personal effects, including documents and letters. He used the information gathered from them to secretly manipulate his husband. Ben would completely ignore him for weeks and then return his affection if Peter bought him something. These mind games, or gaslighting, escalated more and more to the point that the cleaning assistant who worked at the house commented on it and was dismissed by Ben. Around January 2015, in addition to this abuse, Ben began drugging Peter's drinks, juices, teas and food with tranquilizers and opioids. These are synthetic drugs similar to morphine. Peter, in turn, began to sleep most of the day. His neighbours noticed his long absences, which could last for days and on occasion an entire week. At a book signing event, Peter felt a little out of it and started apologising to people. Eventually he passed out and fell. This was bad for Peter's career. People started to think that he was abusing alcohol, and this was making him be disrespectful to his readers. Things got even worse after he lost a lot of weight. Bruises appeared on his body, and his memory started to get faulty. Ben's abuse of Peter didn't stop. He began to manipulate situations to make people believe that Peter was going crazy. He changed passwords and pretended that Peter forgot them. He changed information in Peter's appointment book, pretending that Peter had said something that he had never actually said. Sometimes he would hide an object in the house, and when Peter became frustrated at not finding it, he put the object somewhere that Peter had already looked. "Here, my love. It was here the whole time." Peter just thought, "My God, I'm going crazy. I just might be. I'm sure I looked for this here." Suspicious of his own sanity, Peter even called in several doctors to see what was going on, but they found nothing. Ben had probably stopped his medication a few days before the blood tests. Suspecting that there was something seriously wrong with him, Peter changed his will again, now leaving £25,000 to Ben instead of 15 and removing the 2-year relationship clause for him to obtain the house. A few days later, Peter took a very bad fall down the stairs and had to be hospitalized. During this time, his memory improved a lot. He felt better. He had more energy, but he still didn't connect the dots. Ben, in turn, had just started a new occupation. He was now ingratiating himself with one of Peter's neighbours who lived on the same block. She was Anne Moore Martin, an 83-year-old retired school principal, and Peter had never met her. I couldn't find information on how they met, whether it was at the local church or walking around the neighbourhood. But it's a fact that although Peter and Anne lived in close proximity, they didn't know each other. Each night, Ben would drug Peter, then go to Anne's house. He was needy and showered her with affection. They often ate dinner together, watched TV and films that Ben brought. Movies which were almost always about a relationship between an older woman and a younger man. Amid the compliments and the films, Ben invented lies to get Anne to lend him money. Within just 2 weeks, he had already managed to swindle £3,000 from her. On October 26, 2015, the day before Ben's birthday, almost a year and 7 months into their marriage, he gave Peter a fatal dose. Ben mixed a large amount of tranquilizers into his husband's drink and ended his life. To cover his crime, he left an almost empty whiskey bottle next to Peter. It looked like Peter had drunk most of the contents. The following morning, the house's cleaning assistant arrived to find Peter not breathing. She shouted for Ben while phoning emergency services. Ben was in despair. It was his birthday and his husband had just passed away. It is not known why, but an autopsy was not performed and the cause of death was given as alcohol poisoning. Within just a month, Ben had sold the house and pocketed the money. With more time available, he focused his attention on Anne and convinced her to start a relationship with him. He constantly suggested that she put his name in her will, but she wavered. Frustrated, he began to engage in emotional blackmail. He invented stories to gain her trust. In March 2016, she finally fell into his trap and decided to change her will. But fortunately for Anne, and unfortunately for Ben, she hired the same lawyer who had acted for Peter, and he of course quickly understood what was happening. The lawyer contacted Anne's niece so that she, as a family member, could intervene in this request to alter the will. She succeeded, but it wasn't long before Anne returned and proceeded with including him in her will. Remember that Ben's modus operandi was to drug Peter, but with Anne, his tactics were different. She was a very religious woman, so he wrote messages on the mirrors in the house. They appeared to be messages from God, which, of course, always favoured him. There were several messages, some saying, "Your soul will proceed directly to heaven, her soul to joy, his to perfection. This good you will can never be undone. Peace is yours in me, your Lord. Amen. Pray for Ben. Ben loves you. Your intentions are holy. Your work is not yet done. Take care and complete the task given to you by your Lord. All that you give him, he will return tenfold." He also gave her a tally counter as a gift. This counter is a small device with a button that adds 1 unit every time you press it. He wanted Anne to press the button every time she thought of him. The poor thing found it romantic, so she spent all day pressing that button. Maybe he did it as a way to manipulate, to tighten his grip on her by unconsciously forcing her to think about him all the time. Because he had given her a gift to squeeze when she thought about him, and she wasn't going to squeeze it just twice a day, for example. Ben went further. He even took nude photos of Anne with the intention of blackmailing her later. In February 2017, Anne suffered a stroke and was hospitalized. During her hospitalization, one of her nieces stayed with her, and during their conversations, Anne told her about her relationship with Ben. She told her about the love and affection he had for her, everything he did for her. But she also told her about the money she lent him and the messages from God that he received on the mirrors. Finding this all very strange, the niece discreetly contacted the police, who began an investigation. After trying to visit her in the hospital and being blocked by her niece, Ben returned to Anne's house to clean it. Not only did he steal valuables like jewellery and money, but he also cleaned up any evidence linking him to the house and his romantic relationship with her. He erased the messages on the mirrors, took photos of himself in photo frames which were scattered around the house. He also took the gifts he gave her, including lingerie and various sex shop materials. He took all of this out of the house so that her niece would not find it. But just as he was leaving the house, her niece arrived. She did not catch him removing things as everything was already in his car. But she did still catch him on the premises. She told him what her aunt had said and he confirmed it, but he explained that it was a relationship of love based on tenderness. When her niece entered the house and Ben left, she noticed that both the jewellery and money were missing. She called him and asked if he took anything, but he denied it. It didn't matter to her, because the police were already on his tail investigating him, and at one point or another they would find out. Upon being discharged and returning home, Anne realised that her gifts, her portraits, her jewellery and her money were gone. Her niece explained that the police were already investigating. A few days later, the police contacted her niece and gave her an update on the investigation. They said that Ben had actually been embezzling for some time, and that he had been involved in several other crimes including fraud, theft and home invasion, among others. In other words, at the age of 25, he already had a long criminal record. Anne removed his name from her will, but it was all too hard for her. She blamed herself, believing that she had been foolish to have fallen for it. She was also very ashamed that he had taken the photos of her that he could publish in the future. She fell into a deep depression. 3 months later, on May 12, 2017, Anne died of natural causes. Even so, investigations continued. Peter's body was exhumed and subjected to a toxicological test, which proved the real cause of the writer's death, an overdose of sedatives. The results of this test also did not rule out the possibility that Peter had been suffocated. Ben was arrested on a charge of murder, and the investigations continued. The prosecution needed as much evidence as possible to prove the accusations. This suspect's past was full of crimes. They found several more victims of his financial scams, including members of the church where he worked, and even his own grandparents. The police also gained access to his personal email account and discovered several things there. Ben had saved a list of emails that he had sent to himself in a folder, recording everything he had done with Peter and Anne, like a virtual diary. It was in these emails that police found photos of the text on the mirrors and the intimate photos of Anne. The police also found several mentions of a man called Thomas Field, and the surname caught their attention. Thomas was Ben's brother, who worked as a waiter at one of the restaurants Ben often went to with Peter and Anne. The police suspected that Peter and Anne did not know Thomas was Ben's brother, and that Thomas would bring Peter dishes he had not ordered in order to confuse him. There were also several email exchanges with a man called Martin Smith. Martin was 30 years old and an aspiring magician-illusionist. He had met Ben at Buckingham University. Martin was also Peter's student, and in these emails, the two seemed to devise a plan to kill Anne. Options included increasing her sodium intake, falling down the stairs, sleep apnea, and even intense sex. Due to these notes and emails, Thomas and Martin were located, questioned, but not arrested. However, both were included in the prosecution charges, and during the hearings were judged to be accomplices to Ben's plans. Ben's defense lawyers asked the court to order an in-depth psychiatric analysis of the accused. This analysis showed that Ben suffered from a personality disorder, including narcissistic personality. Tests indicated he was unable to feel empathy or remorse. When Ben was arrested, he claimed his innocence. But in one of the trial hearings that took place between 2018 and 2019, he ended up admitting that he took pleasure in manipulating Peter and Anne, and that he knew he had an incredible gift for convincing people to do what he wanted. Ben was charged with murder, robbery, fraud, and conspiracy to murder. In 2019, Thomas and Martin were found not guilty on all charges. Ben, aged 28, was found guilty of Peter's murder. Regarding Anne's death, he was considered innocent, as a direct connection with her death was not proven. Regarding the robberies at her house, he was found guilty and ordered to pay compensation to the family. The sentence given to him for Peter's death was life imprisonment. Although he had already spent a good part of the money he inherited from Peter, the law in England required him to return the correct amount to Peter's family. So while in jail, any funds he receives from the government for his work will be sent to Peter's nieces, who were the other heirs in his will. There are certainly many criminals like Benjamin out there, waiting to take advantage of and pose a danger to the most vulnerable. They exploit weakness as an opportunity for manipulation. Sometimes the abuser doesn't commit murder, but psychological abuse such as gaslighting, neglect, and even minor physical abuse are enough to destroy the victim's life. If you've made it this far, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to this channel. Also, add your opinion in our comments. Thank you very much. I will see you in the next case.